This is a story about gold mining. There's a huge number of people in the world that are generally poor and they're in developing countries, and when they find, usually by happenstance, a deposit of gold, they start digging it up. And it's a fairly simple process, except that in order to get the most gold as possible out of the ore, the dirt, you have to use mercury, which, as everyone knows, is an extraordinarily toxic compound. And the mercury is running off not only in the water with the mine tailings, but also they're burning it off to separate it from the gold. And it's leaching into the atmosphere. And it hangs around for a long, long time, generations. And it also travels. In the places that we were in Suriname, there are villages, indigenous villages. These people have been living in the jungles of South America for, they don't know how long, generations. But the problem is that the mercury is running off of these mines into the water and becoming methylated, which means that through a very natural and organic process, it turns into something actually more toxic. And then it gets into the fish. The fish eat the plants, and then, those fish are eaten by bigger fish, and those fish are eaten by bigger fish. And a lot of the aquatic life is really the only source of protein for these indigenous villages. It's a larger problem in the sense that the fish don't just hang around the villages or the gold mines. They can travel, very far distances, almost all the way down to the ocean. And in fact, in Suriname, a lot of people eat fish. The rivers are chock full of them. The effects of mercury poisoning are neurological. So you're going to end up with shaking, gait problems, having trouble walking, touching, you can't feel anything. The doctor that we were with on this trip was actually doing that. He was looking at these folks in the indigenous communities to see if they had any symptoms of mercury poisoning, and he found quite a few, especially in the children, because mercury is particularly harmful on little kids and unborn children. It was an interesting experience. I mean, it's not often that you're in a place where you're so completely isolated. I mean, we had satellite phones, but we didn't use them, and your cell phones don't work. And after a couple of days, it's actually pretty refreshing to not be in constant contact with the world. So for us to visit these gold mines and to visit the indigenous communities with this group of medical professionals that we were traveling with, we had to fly first on a very old airplane, and when you fly for miles in about an hour, and there's absolutely nothing underneath you except for this jungle canopy, and every once in a while you can see mines cut out of it. And we landed on a grass runway, which was really short, and so the plane came down, smacked into the ground, and then pulled on the brakes. It was a hair-raising experience. And then once we land in this tiny little airstrip, you actually have to go further downstream to get to the actual village. And to do that, we had to drag, I think it was 25 cases of camera gear and medical gear and all sorts of other stuff, food. We had to bring everything with us. And it took about 15 trips to get all of our stuff back to the village area. I think I saw the biggest bug I've ever seen in my entire life in the outhouse one night. It was, I'd say at least a foot long, 6 legs, skinny. It was impressive, and he didn't move. I just gave him his space and walked around him. A real big problem on this trip is there's not a lot of infrastructure in Suriname. The roads aren't great, and to get to a lot of these mines, you have to drive over these these terrible roads that have a million potholes, and they're all muddy, and it's a rainforest as well, so there's a ton of moisture and rain all the time. And in one particular place, we were just finished visiting a mine, and we were actually trying to get out of there before it got dark. And we went down, it looked like a solid mud flat, but as soon as the SUV hit it, we sank into the mud. And not just sank, but like we're stuck in the mud. And they tried for about 45 minutes to push us out. A lot of the miners were there, who are these young Brazilian kids, and that didn't work. And then they actually had to go fetch a backhoe who came with a giant chain, and they more or less dragged us out of the mud. So we got out, and it was okay. Holy cow. There's 70-some nations that are doing this kind of mining at this point. And so it's got a real global reach, and it's the #1 contributor of mercury to the environment in the world. It's even more so than coal-burning power plants. And again, that stuff moves around the planet. So yeah, it's something that we should be aware of at the very least.